Hello folks, Wilson Ninja here, bringing you another nerdy video. Today, it is Friday. If you're watching this live, it'll possibly be Saturday if you're watching this on YouTube. Now, today I'm going to be doing 3 D&E videos. First off is going to be me finishing up the race video, which will be, today we're talking about orcs. And then the next video is going to be about barbarians. And then last but not least, then we'll be going on with our usual broadcast. So, now when I say orcs, I really meant to say half orcs, because you can't actually play as an orc yet until you get Volo's Guide. Now, let's jump. Well, quick announcement. Sadly, we're down a player for the perceivable future, mostly just due to the fact that scheduling and the things like that. So, the player Brian, who controlled Wong, will no longer be with us for a while. And reminds me, folks, I actually forgot to set up this schedule for this week to make sure that everyone can attend. I'm just going to quickly do that now. There we go. Start plan. Set for today for 7:30 p.m. Hopefully we can get as many of the people as we can. Hopefully we can get Jessica back. She was going through some life situations, so I can't exactly fault her for not making it. Anyway, I set the plan. Hopefully she can attend. Anyway, let's go on with the orcs. Well, half orcs. Now, the bit that I'll be reading out for you is actually, I'm going to check and just make sure you can hear me, because last time I actually did a recording for Half Orcs. It was actually last week, but sadly I forgot my mic was not plugged in, and I was like, oh god, no. And I wasted too much time and I had too much stuff to do that day. So I'm going to jump on Twitch right now, use my phone instead of using my desktop. Hopefully it works. So we go to my channel. There we go. Oop, accidentally clicked the wrong button. Now I'm just going to check out the audio, see if you can hear me. Alright, it seems like you can in fact hear me. There's some sort of extra noise going on in the background. I have no idea what that is. But you seem to be able to hear me well enough. Also, I'll need to retitle this episode to Havorks, because currently the broadcast is set to Dungeons and Dragons Lunar Guard Adventures, and it should not be labelled that. Actually, I'll do that right now. Actually, I might as well jump onto my thing. I have desktop audio off, so you should not be able to hear the audio. Because I really want to start getting into the habit of setting my current broadcast. So we're just going to do that. Type in. We're going to mute my speakers as much as I can. D&D discussion video half orcs. And we're currently, actually that's about right. Again, I'm not sure about the spelling of discussion. Again, I'm a horrible speller, folks. So it's spelled DISUSSI. Oh, I actually got it right. Nice. Sorry, I'm always paranoid about my spelling. Like, we're also just gonna might as well double check the audio right there. So it's spelled DISU. Yeah. So yeah, you can hear me. You can hear me well enough on my computer. So maybe it was just my phone being bad. All right. Now, as per usual, I like to read out the quote from a book, then general gist, then the section that talks about their appearance, and then the section that talks about their personality, and then about their culture, and then their names, traits, and then if there's a sidebar, I will read the sidebar. Now, like the tiefling video and the half elf video, this video is going to be fairly short due to the fact of a lack of sub-races. So, now today's quote is from the author Richard Baker, and it's from the book Sword Mage. Okay. The war chief Murin roused himself from his sleeping furs and his women and pulled a short hauberk of heavy steel rings over his thick, well-muscled torso. He usually rose before most of his warriors, since he had a strong streak of human blood in him, and he found the daylight less bothersome than most of his tribe did. Among the bloody skulls, a warrior is judged by his strength, his fierceness, and his wits. Human ancestry was no blemish against a warrior, provided he was every bit as strong, enduring, and bloodthirsty as his full-blooded kin. Half-orcs, who were weaker than their orc comrades, didn't last long among the Bloodskulls, or any other orc tribe for that matter. But it was often true that a bit of human blood gave a warrior just the right mix of cunning, ambition, and self-discipline to go far indeed, as Murin had. He was a master of a tribe that could muster 2,000 spears, and the strongest chief in Tar. And that is the quote. By, again, Richard Baker is the author, Sword Mage is the book. If you have it, I'm sure it's a good read. Again, I can only go based off this thing. So I have no idea what the Sword Mage is about. Okay, let's get into the general description. Whether united under the leadership of a mighty warlock or having fought to a standstill after years of conflict, an orc and human tribes sometimes form alliances, joining forces into a larger horde to the terror of civilized lands nearby. When these alliances are sealed by marriages, half-orcs are born. Some half-orcs rise to become proud chiefs of orc tribes, their human blood giving them an edge over the full-blooded orc. Some ventured into the world to prove their worth among humans and other more civilized races. Many of these become adventurers, achieving greatness for their mighty deeds and authority for the barbaric customs in savage fury. So, half-orcs are, by that description, half-orc, like orc society does not blemish. Like, again, it's a thing that there are human barbarian tribes. There's human people that do not like civilized land. Like, I'm not just talking thieves or cutthroats. I'm talking like proper barbarians, similar to how orcs are, in such a way. And hell, in some cases, even Goliath. So, that is why you can sometimes see, if you I type in on my random generators goblin seed, in terms of generating the encounter. Like if I'm looking for a goblin themed encounter, I type in goblin seed, and even if occasional orc shows up, and that's because war bands, They take like those type of warband tribes take in anyone who's strong. Mind you, it will take an exceptionally strong goblin chief to overcome an orc. So often in that case, it's the orc that's pulling the strings, or a bugbear. Now that is if a half orc is living amongst orcs or human barbarian tribes. But then when we get to civilized society, they're probably looked on with a bit of like intimidation, like, oh my god, don't fuck with this person. Look at the size of them. But they're still welcomed in terms against the tiefling, where a tiefling is met with loads of superstition and fear, and also like heavily discrimination. If you remember watching my video, and I read out the sidebar of the uncommon races. See, half orcs are treated with fear more from intimidation and sheer stature rather than their race. It's more about their appearance of being so strong. So there people tend to step aside, like, to not to anger them, in risk of being killed or whatever. Whereas with tieflings are full blown discriminated against, as in like doors being locked or barred, people casting word signs, or even crossing the street in fear of it crossing their path. So half orcs are more accepted. Half orcs, like half elves, are accepted in human society, whereas half elves are sometimes looked down upon in terms of their elven society. Half orcs though are not looked down upon in orc society, due to the fact that they may have that, like, it may not diminish their strength. Now let's get into their appearance. Half orcs have greyish pigmentations and sloping foreheads. They have jutting jaws, and they have tusks. They have basically tusks, but the description in the book is prominent teeth and towering bills of orcish heritage are plain to see. So the orc blood runs extremely strong, that it influences their appearance so much. With half elves, it was more of a balance. It was very much of a balance. Like, humans would see an elf, whereas then elves would see a human. Where half orcs, you can probably, because of the greyish skin, you can probably tell it's a half orc, but they're still so like the half elf's figure is very deceptive. Like, as what we got, like, they can range as close as humans, and they can range as thin as elves. Whereas according to this, half orcs generally range in only one set: muscular and strong, which is very interesting. That their heritage is so obvious. Like, and here's where when it comes to their height, they stand between 6 to 7 feet tall. 6 feet. That and when we get into the deeper concept of character creation, which is when you roll, you can roll for height. See, in the section that we're talking about now, with just about the races, we're given a generalized height. We're not given the random table where you roll and that determines your character's height and weight. So right now, from what we can go based off just from this reading alone, the shortest the shortest half orcs range at 6 feet, whereas then the shortest humans, again, going based off pure off their traits, not haven't looked at the table yet, so don't bat my head off. Whereas then a human stands from barely 5 feet to well over 6 feet. So the shortest human is barely over 5 foot, and then they can be well over 6 feet. Now that could be, they don't mention 7 foot, so it is below 7 foot. Whereas half orcs, half orcs are always strongly built. That's the point here, and they weigh between 180 to 250 pounds. Now, due to the stature of orcs and strength, and how powerful their bloodline is, and based on the description that we were given, this weight is quite possibly coming from mostly muscle. Now, there's a bit more into the description. Orcs regard battle scars as tokens of pride, and ornamental scars are as things of beauty. Other scars, though, mark an orc or half-orc as a former slave or disgraced to exile. Any half-orc who has lived among or near orcs has scars, whether they are marks of humiliation or of pride, recounting their past exploits and injuries. Such a half-orc living among humans might display these scars proudly or hide them in shame. So yeah, your character, based on your half-orc backstory, you should have scars. Like if you're a half-orc that was raised among barbarian tribes or orc tribe, you should have battle scars, and you can then create like a more of an intricate backstory about each scar. Which would be cool, like have like a backstory for each scar that's on his body, depending on how old you are. That is it for the description case. We're now going to move on to their personality. Now, this is where it gets interesting, because if you remember my last video, tieflings have very little influence from their fiendish heritage or devil heritage, depending on if it was a devil. So they have very little influence on the tiefling, because again, like from what I gathered from the tiefling section, you could either be born a tiefling, your parents could you could actually have a proper devil or fiend in your heritage, as in like your mother or your father had mated with a fiend or devil, and then that began the chain of tieflings, or your family was somehow part of an ancient dark ritual that then left that mark on your genetics, if you're going to a scientific term, and then that led then like sort of contamination, and that led down to tieflings. Again, either way, your fiendish or devil heritage has very little impact on you. This is not the case with half-orcs, and we'll see right here. This section is called the Mark of Groomish. The one-eyed god Groomish created the orcs, and given those orcs who turn away from his word, have created the orcs, and even those orcs who had turned away from his worship can't fully escape his influence. The same is true of half-orcs, though their human blood moderates the impact of their orcish heritage. Some half-orcs hear whispers of Groomish in their dreams, calling them to unleash the rage that simmers within them. Others feel Groomish's exultation when they join in melee combat, and either exult along with him or shiver with fear and loathing. Half-orcs are not evil by nature, but evil does lurk within them. However, whether they embrace it or rebel against it, beyond the rage of Groomish, half-orcs feel emotion powerfully. Rage doesn't just quicken their pulse, it makes their bodies burn. An insult stings like acid, and sadness saps their strength. But they laugh loudly and hurriedly, and simple bodily pleasures, feasting, drinking, wrestling, drumming, and wild dancing, fill their hearts with joy. They tend to be short-tempered and sometimes sullen, more inclined to action than contemplation, and to fighting than arguing. The most accomplished half-orcs are those with enough self-control to get by in a civilized land. So yeah, that is really interesting. That like the fact that tieflings have their bloodline has very little influence on their personalities and whatnot. But half-orcs. Now again, I suppose it's because they were made by a god, whereas tieflings were made with a fiend or a devil. I suppose that is the case, but that is still very interesting that because of this god creating them, even half-orcs, even after generation of generation, it does not dilute his influence to the point where even half-orcs are still affected. So yeah, let's continue on. We're now going to go about their society, tribes, and slums. Half orcs most often live among orcs. Of the other races, humans are most likely to accept half orcs, and half orcs almost always live in human lands when not living among orc tribes. Whether providing themselves among rough barbarian tribes or scrabbling to survive in the slums of larger cities, half orcs get by on their physical might, their endurance, and their sheer determination they inherit from their human ancestry. So yeah, that is why in some cases, like, you'll see orcs always being mercenaries, adventurers, bodyguards, enforcers. Did I say barbarians? Maybe barbarians. Yeah. You could still get orc assassins and orc rogues, and charlatans. Hell, I've seen half orc bards, but it's just that this is what is very common. It's because of their stature and their strength, and their rage and love for battle that they inherit from Groomish. Half orcs can resist the love of battle, but as we've seen, that it's still whispered in the back of their heads. Now, here we go when it comes to orc names. Half orcs usually have names appropriate to the culture in which they were raised. A half orc who wants to fit in among humans might trade an orc name for a human. Some half orcs with a human name decide to adopt a girl orc name because they think it makes them more intimidating. Here's examples of male orc names: Dench, Fen, Shump, Tok, Hog, Krusk, and then Murin. I think that's how it's pronounced. It seems like Murin. Now, female names: Bake, Shota, Suta, Vola, Yvelda, Kenzif, Miv, Naga, Ovak. I don't know if I was saying those correctly, but that's how I think an orc would sound. I don't know how my Irish accent, to some of you guys that are not used to it, may have made it sound like. But again, it'll be interesting. Now, before we get into the traits, let's go over the sidebar, as I like to do if there's a sidebar. Now, this one is titled Grudging Acceptance. Each half-orc finds a way to gain acceptance from those who hate orcs. Some are reserved, trying not to draw attention to themselves. A few demonstrate piety and good-heartedness as publicly as they can, whether or not such demonstrations are genuine, and some simply try to be so tough that others simply avoid them. So yeah, that's where it gets interesting. Again, like, even people who hate them, the orc will try and win them over, like being good and all that. But yeah, and then it comes down to, like, if they don't get their acceptance, they're probably just gonna give in and be like, yeah, just stay on my way. Now let's get into the nit and gritty of the mechanics of playing a half orc. Now, you get your strength. Well, sorry, hold on. I feel a sneeze coming on. Oh, bless me. Your strength score increases by 2. So if you have 16, it becomes 18, and your constitution goes up by 1. So if you have 16 con, it'll go up to 17. Half orcs mature a little faster than humans, reaching adulthood around 40. They age notably faster and rarely live longer than 75 years. So you could have an orc be around 70 and then have possibly 6, maybe 7 years left. But the thing is that they age notably faster, so that therefore, like, you would have the appearance of very old. Now let's go into the alignment. Half orcs inherit a tendency towards chaos from their orc parents, and are not strongly inclined towards good. Half orcs raised among orcs and willing to live out their lives among them are usually evil. Now, how should I put this? Evil does not necessarily mean comic book or movie evil. The way I've seen it play out in terms of D&D, is you're just more inclined to care about yourself and not caring about laws or anyone else. Like a kind of good character, so like for example, could be Robin Hood, and because he doesn't care about the law, but he's not doing it for himself. He's doing it to help others. Whereas an orc barbarian tribe, most of them will be chaotic evil. Like they don't give two shits about society, laws, or order. They'll take what they want, but it would often not be for the tribe. It would be for themselves. You know. So that is the situation. Half orcs are somewhat larger and bulkier than humans, and they range from 5 to well over 6 feet tall. Your size is medium. So yeah, so in this category they say 5. 5 is as high as as short as you can go, but you can go well over 6 feet. Your base walking speed is 30. You have dark vision of up to 60 feet. Now that's dark vision. Now we get into the very unique abilities the half orcs get that set them apart from the other races. Because again, some races share dark vision, and some share the same speed. So dark vision, it's only like until after you get to dark vision or not. Like dark vision will either be there, but if it's there, then this is where you get into the very unique stuff. You get a trait called menacing, which gives you proficiency intimidation. So that no matter what class or background you're playing, if you're playing a half orc, you are intimidating. You have relentless endurance, but now this is where it gets a bit cool. For those of you that are familiar with Critical Role, spoiler alert. For the next 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You've been warned. I'm going to say it now. In Critical Role, there was a moment where Grog entered a pit fighting arena. This was a religious sort of situation. Like it was for the god Cord, and he fought a half orc monk. And no matter Grog lost his first fight, but mostly due to the fact that like he was not expecting, first of all, a monk. And then he also was sort of overwhelmed by the relentless endurance. Like this helped the half orc in the end win. When you are reduced to 0 hit points, but are not killed outright, you can drop to 1 hit point instead. You can't use this feature again until you finish a long rest. So like, say if you have like, I don't know, 20 hit points, but then a person deals 21 damage. You could be like, oh, no, I'm still here. And then, boom, you can, like, that is really handy, especially if, like, you need time to let your healer get to you, you know? Now, the next unique ability is called Savage Attacks. When you score a critical hit with a melee weapon attack, you can roll one of the weapon's damage dice one additional time and add it to the extra damage of the critical hit. So like, okay, a great sword is 1d12, I believe. Where's my d12? My d12. There we go. Okay, so if I was to roll my d12, which I'm doing right now, and rolled a 3, but it was a critical hit. So now, generally, the way some people do crit damage, where you just take that number, like you will take the 3 and then just simply double it, which will make a 6. Some people mean if you roll a crit, you roll the damage dice, you double all damage dice, which I prefer. I prefer that rule. So yeah, I scored a critical hit. So that means I roll my greatsword die again. That's another d12. So I rolled a 1 that time. So that means my crit damage is 4. But because of Savage Attacks, I get to roll again. That time I got 11. So instead of dealing 4 crit damage, I'm dealing 15 crit damage. See how that extra time. Now I could have rolled a 1. I could have honestly rolled a 1, but that's what makes it exciting. Like is like that little bit of extra damage. And if you've got like the maximum damage input, like let's say you have 18 strength, that gives you a +4. That means your maximum damage with this greatsword could be 12, then 24, then and then 36 plus 4 because of your strength modifier, getting you up to getting you up to 40 damage. And that's from level 1. That could be a level 1. I'm actually just going to double check now weapons, because we're at the end of the video. So let's see here. Scrolling. It's after all the backgrounds and whatnot. Sorry, folks. That's just because, again, this is where it gets really interesting with, again, as I said, playing a half orc. And hell, playing a half orc rogue. You know? Now, technically, you don't double your sneak attack. It's literally just your weapon. So let's take the greatsword. Actually, if I was playing an orc, I would feel more inclined to go axe. But okay. Martial. Okay. Greatsword is actually 2d6. Sorry, what's the d12? Because a lance is 1d12. Okay, so yeah, there's no attack. There's no. Oh yeah, great axe. So yeah, so great axe. Again, maximum damage output. Boom. You get up to 40. Now, technically, if I was to roll a greatsword, that's 2d6. So, base damage with a greatsword would have been 6. Max damage would have been 6. Then another 6 from just the weapon itself. That's 12. Then double that. So that's 24. And then an extra d6, 3. So yeah, like, if you're, that's why personally, if I was going orc, I would, again, that's minimaxing. But I also, when I picture orcs, I picture axes. They're sort of like, it's sort of like the same way as I picture dwarves. Like, if I'm playing a dwarf or an orc, I like to go axes over swords. Now, generally, I prefer swords way more. So, like, even if I was playing a Goliath or a human, and I was going like barbarian or something like that, I would be more inclined to use a sword. You know, I don't know why. I just like it. I just like swords better than axes. But anyway, that is the savagery of an half. That is just the savagery of a half orc with a great axe. Now, folks, class recommendations. Let's see here. Obviously, barbarian. You could go pretty much. Hold on, I'm just scrolling up now to the thing. Based on the strength and con and your traits and whatnot, obvious recommendations are barbarian. You could go fighter. You could go paladin. Ranger, maybe. Rogue, a little bit maybe. But yeah, it's mostly it's melee fire. So I can only really, the only time I can recommend playing a half orc is when you're playing a melee class, which is a barbarian, cleric, fighter, monk, paladin, ranger, or rogue. Now, technically, monk and rogue, they're more focused on using, they mostly focus on using dex. But rogue and monk do have, I think, some weapons that allow them to use, that can use strength. But for monk, it's mostly dex, so I can't really suggest monk all too much. The only reason why I would mention monk would be just due to purely savage attacks, and the getting back up after, like, that ability. It's literally them. In terms of strength modifier, not so much. You would have to put that +2 to strength in strength somewhere else. You would not give your 16 to strength. You would give it to a dex. Now again, that could lead you into have that could lead to you can have your strength be at your dumb stat as a monk, as a half orc, and then have it get raised to 10. So it's not, you don't get a minus to your strength stuff. You'll just get +0 or -0. So you could do that. You could use your attribute bonus to counteract, your dump stat. So you're not as it's not as impacted as you would think. Or you can have strength be somewhere else. It doesn't have to be your dump stat as a rogue, as a monk. You could be you could put it into your dump stat could be charisma because you live a social isolated life, so you may not be used as talking to people. Again, either way, there's stuff you can do with a monk with those two traits. But yeah, in terms of all of them, barbarian, fighter, cleric, paladin, those things can make use of strength, especially barbarian and fire. Now, speaking of barbarian, folks, that is it for my half-work video. Now, I am going to grab another cup of tea. I'm gonna check I'm gonna check on a few things, like check some messages and whatnot. But then I will be getting back to. I'll be back to talk about what's it called, Barbarians. And then that will be my final video for a while until I get to my broadcast. I will not be doing any other videos because I want to save my voice for when I'm doing, when I'm being a DM. So, this is Willful Ninja, sign out. May the force be with you, and remember, roll for initiative.